One steak costs $20. Another costs $200. One shows up at a backyard barbecue. The other arrives beneath restaurant spotlights while half the room turns to look. Yet both can come from the same animal, the same side of beef, the same journey. So what makes one cut ordinary and another legendary? Why do chefs obsess over marbling? Why do steak lovers argue endlessly about ribeye versus filet mignon? And why have some of the most flavorful steaks remained hidden from most diners? Today, we're following the map hidden inside a side of beef, from everyday favorites to steakhouse icons. And by the end, you'll understand why every steak tells a completely different story. Most people think great steak starts with the grill. Others think it starts with the cow. The truth is somewhere in between. Breed matters, feed matters, aging matters. But one of the biggest factors is location. Every side of beef contains many different muscles, and every muscle performed a different job during the animal's life. Some worked constantly. Others were used relatively little. Less used muscles tend to be more tender. Harder working muscles often develop a stronger beef flavor. That's the trade-off hidden inside nearly every steak: tenderness or intensity. And no cut balances those qualities better than the king of the steakhouse. Before the steak reaches the plate, ribeye already has an advantage: marbling. Those thin white streaks running through the meat aren't flaws. They're one of the reasons ribeye became famous. Ribeye comes from the rib section, a relatively less used area compared with many harder working muscles. That helps explain its tenderness. But tenderness alone didn't build its reputation. The marbling did. As the steak cooks, intramuscular fat slowly melts into the meat. The result is richness, juiciness, and a deep beef flavor that steak lovers chase around the world. That's why ribeye dominates steakhouse menus from Texas to Sydney. It rarely forces a compromise. You get tenderness, you get flavor, you get richness, all at the same time. For many people, ribeye isn't just another steak. It's the benchmark, the standard every other steak has to compete against. Not every great steak wears a crown. Some simply show up every day and deliver. That's sirloin. Compared with ribeye, sirloin usually contains less marbling, less richness, less extravagance. But that's exactly why many people love it. The flavor feels cleaner, leaner, more direct. For generations, sirloin has been the steak of family dinners, neighborhood restaurants, and backyard cookouts. It sits comfortably between premium cuts and budget cuts, reliable, affordable, consistently satisfying, and sometimes reliability earns its own kind of respect. If ribeye is abundance, filet mignon is refinement. Few steaks have built a reputation around a single quality as successfully as this one. Tenderness. Filet mignon comes from the tenderloin, a relatively underused muscle near the spine. Because the muscle performs less work than many others, it remains naturally tender. The result feels almost unreal. A knife glides through effortlessly. Each bite offers very little resistance. And that's where one of steak culture's oldest debates begins. Because tenderness and flavor are not the same thing. Filet mignon excels at one. Ribeye often excels at the other. Some steak lovers see filet mignon as the ultimate expression of elegance. Others believe it sacrifices some flavor in exchange for softness. Neither side is wrong. They're simply looking for different things. And that's why the argument never ends. Most steaks ask you to choose tenderness or flavor. T-bone and porterhouse offer both. At first glance, they look nearly identical. A large T-shaped bone separates two different muscles. On one side sits strip steak, bold, rich, distinctly beefy. On the other side sits tenderloin, tender, delicate, refined. Two completely different steak experiences connected by a single bone. The difference between them is surprisingly precise. Both contain the same muscles, but porterhouse includes a larger section of tenderloin. That's why porterhouse became known as the larger, more prestigious version. the celebration steak, the special occasion steak, the steak that seems designed to impress, and that idea reaches its absolute peak with the next cut. Some steaks are bought for flavor. A tomahawk is often bought for the experience. Long before anyone takes the first bite, the steak has already become the center of attention. A server appears carrying a massive cut of beef. A long exposed rib bone stretches beyond the plate. Heads turn. Phones come out. Conversations pause. For a moment, the entire room notices. And that's exactly why the tomahawk became famous. Because beneath all the spectacle lies a surprisingly simple truth. A tomahawk is essentially a ribeye with a long rib bone left attached and trimmed clean. The same muscle, the same marbling, the same rich flavor. What changes is the presentation, the scale, the drama. People rarely remember the exact cooking temperature years later. They remember the moment it arrived at the table, the reactions, the photographs, the celebration. Because sometimes food becomes more than a meal. Sometimes it becomes a memory. Now let's move from spectacle to skill. Because some of the most rewarding steaks aren't expensive. They're understood. Flank steak comes from the abdominal region, a harder working area of the animal. The muscle fibers are long. The texture is firmer, and compared with premium steakhouse cuts, tenderness is not its greatest strength. Flavor is deep, bold, distinctly beefy. This is why flank steak became popular in dishes ranging from Tex-Mex fajitas to grilled specialties across Latin America. But flank steak comes with a lesson. Technique matters. Cut with the grain and it can feel chewy. Slice against the grain and the experience changes dramatically. The same steak suddenly feels far more tender. It's one of the best examples of a simple truth. Great cooking isn't always about buying the most expensive ingredient. Sometimes it's about understanding the ingredient you already have. For years, One Cut quietly developed a loyal following among chefs, butchers, and serious steak lovers. Hanger steak, often called the butcher's steak. Unlike ribeye or porterhouse, hanger steak never became a mainstream celebrity. Most diners rarely saw it on restaurant menus, partly because there isn't much of it. Each animal provides only a small amount, and partly because those who knew about it valued it highly. Hanger steak hangs near the diaphragm and delivers a flavor profile unlike almost any other cut. Rich, deep, intensely beefy. Some chefs consider it one of the most flavorful steaks available. Not the most tender, not the most luxurious, but one of the most distinctive. No giant bone, no dramatic presentation, no luxury branding, just remarkable flavor. The kind that reminds people that prestige and quality aren't always the same thing. Sometimes the cuts that receive the least attention have the most character. So which steak is actually the best? There isn't one. There never was. Ribeye offers richness. Filet Mignon offers tenderness. Porterhouse offers variety. Tomahawk offers spectacle. Flank offers value. Hanger offers intensity. Every cut excels at something different. That's why the debate never ends. If people aren't really arguing about beef, they're arguing about what matters most to them. Maybe that's why steak remains so fascinating. Not because it's expensive, not because it's luxurious. Because it means something. A steak often appears during important moments, celebrations, family gatherings, anniversaries, promotions, vacations. For a very long time, cooked meat has played a role in bringing people together. Around tables, around fires, around stories, and every steak represents a different version of that experience. Ribeye represents abundance. Filet Mignon represents refinement. Tomahawk represents celebration. Flank represents craftsmanship. Hanger steak represents discovery. Yet all of them begin with the same basic reality. Different muscles, different functions, different characteristics, the same animal, and in a strange way, people aren't so different. Some are admired for elegance, others for strength, others for resilience, others for qualities that aren't obvious at first glance. The most expensive option isn't always the most meaningful. The most famous isn't always the most memorable. Sometimes the greatest experiences come from unexpected places. A forgotten cut, a backyard grill, a meal shared with the right people. Because in the end, steak isn't really about beef. It's about moments, and every great steak is simply a different way of creating one. So what's your pick? Ribeye? Filet Mignon? Porterhouse? Tomahawk? Or hanger steak?